Hello, everybody, and welcome to this SULF webinar about the changes in the Aliens Act. The webinar will be recorded and published on the SULF website later today. My name is Ulrika, and I work with communications at SULF. If you have any questions during the presentation, then I mean questions of a general nature, you may use the Q&A tool. And we cannot guarantee that there will be time to answer all questions, but we will try. Let me introduce today's presenter, Robert Andersson. He is head of the negotiations team at SULF. Robert, please.
Thank you, Ulrika. And again, welcome to this seminar that will focus on the changes in the Aliens Act implemented this summer. And my name is Robert Andersson. I'm usually head of negotiations team at SULF, the Swedish Association for Teachers, Researchers and Doctoral Candidates. And but I also work quite a lot with issues related to migration. SULF, who are we? We are the professional associations for teachers, researchers and doctoral candidates at Swedish universities. We have today more than 21,000 members. We have no connections to any political parties, and we are one of the members of the Swedish Confederation of Professional Associations that organize academics. And we are also a member in SACO-S, which is the organization that negotiates with the employer for our collective agreements and other issues. And as a member in SULF, you can get advice and support on various matters regarding your salary, benefits connected to your employment and social security issues. We also include an income insurance policy in our membership. I will get back to that in the end of my seminar here. And we also give you all kinds of advice and support on matters on labor law, collective agreements. And through our webpage, you can access a range of material. And we also have a lot of benefits for members regarding, for example, insurances and loans with discount. So the contents for today, I will start by telling you a bit why the rules in the Aliens Act changed this summer, the background, and then present what is new regarding permanent residency for our members in particular. And also what happens if you apply for permanent residency, but you your application is not granted, what possibilities you have in that situation. I will also tell you a bit about an alternative route to get permanent residency that could be of interest. And then I will talk about what you can do if you get a negative decision, if you can appeal and what happens in that case. And then I will tell you what we are doing in order to change, hopefully change this legislation, which of course requires a new decision in the parliament. And then since we get a lot of questions about what happens with the unemployment insurance in this new situation, I will tell you a bit about that in the end. So why did the rules change? In 2015, many asylum seekers came to Sweden, as you probably know, and in that situation, the politicians in the parliament made a temporary law in order to meet this challenge, as they thought it was. And this temporary law was effective until now, July 20 this year. However, the temporary law did not affect doctoral candidates or researchers at all, I would say. It had some impact on relatives, perhaps, but not for you as such. Meanwhile, the politicians started a process in order to introduce permanent changes in the law, the Aliens Act, and that and that is the reason why we have these new rules now. And this new legislation came into force this summer, July 20th. So that is the background. And what is new now in this permanent, or regarding permanent residency in this new law, is that as a general rule, you cannot get permanent residency unless you have had a residence permit for at least 3 years, a time-limited residence permit. Another thing that is new is that you need to have an income through work or your own company in order to get permanent residency. And that is, of course, the major change that affect you. Then you must have shown good conduct, these new rules applies immediately from July 20th, no matter if you applied for permanent residency before that date. As long as the decision was not made before that day, you are under these new rules. So what we want to stress here is that these new rules, they are not specific for doctoral candidates or researchers. So they were not designed for you, so to say. But of course, they have a large impact for you and many others. So then there are a number of things that has not changed. And for example, as a doctoral candidate or researchers, you must have had a residence permit for at least 4 years within a time frame of 7 years. And that is exactly how it was before. It doesn't matter what type of financing you had during that time. The only thing that matters, as we will see, is how your income looks like in the future. You must also have an intention to live in Sweden in the future, and there is still no requirement for knowledge in Swedish language and society, but that will be introduced later, most likely. The rules to get status as long-term resident has also not changed, and I will get back to what that is, because that's quite important, as it turns out. And also the rules for citizenship has not changed, although it indirectly, of course, changes because you need permanent residency in order to apply for citizenship. So for permanent residency, as I said, you need 4 years within 7 years in Sweden, and you need to have any of these 3 types of residence permit, basically. But they can also be combined if needed. So either for work or to have an employment in Sweden, or as a researcher, what is sometimes called guest researcher or visiting researcher, or as doctoral candidates. These all 3 can qualify. To get citizenship, you need to be here for 5 years, and you can also, after 5 years, as we will see, apply for this status as a long-term resident, which is in Swedish called varaktigt bosatt. So the new requirement that is very much in focus right now, of course, is that you need to have an income in order to get permanent residency. And the reason for this is that in the new legislation, it was stated that you must be able to support yourself economically. And then it was left to the government to decide about more detailed rules, and they did, and they said that it should be an income from employment or your own company, and it must be sustainable for some time. And the key term here in Swedish is that the income should be of viss varaktighet. And after that, Migrationsverket has concluded, or they made an interpretation, what does this viss varaktighet mean? And they said that you need an income for that it's expected to last for at least 18 months, and that is from the day they take the decision. So that's the reason why we have this rule right now. So what does this mean? Yes, you must have an income that should last for 18 months, and that could be fulfilled if you have a permanent employment. That's one example they give. Another one is that you have a fixed term contract that is supposed to last for at least 18 months. But that, of course, in practice, you need more, because you also the handling time of your application must be the application must be handled first, and you don't know exactly how long time that will take. But if that takes 6 months, of course, you need 2 years of employment at the time of application, as an example. Of course, an employment as doctoral candidate will also count to fulfill this requirement. However, the problem, as you know, is that such an employment is very rarely long enough to meet this requirement. They also say that a trial employment, which is in Swedish provanställning, can also be approved if they think that it's very likely that it will turn over to a permanent employment after 6 months. And the type of incomes that count, that must be either salary from an employment, or if you have your own company, that's also another income that will count. You can also count certain social benefits that is a compensation for loss of salary during sick leave or parental leave, but that is only if you have an employment at that time. And the income must have a level of at least 5,016 crowns per month plus your housing cost. And if you have to support family members, the income must be higher than that. Then there are some exceptions from this rule that you need an income, and these exceptions will very rarely be of any interest to you, because the exceptions are if you're under 18 years old, if you are able to receive pension, which means that you have to be at least 62 years old at the moment, or if there are special circumstances. That will be very rarely. It's only if it would be unreasonable to claim that the person must have an income. Then we have other problems that we have seen before related to application for permanent residency. And one thing is what we can call that you have the wrong type of residence permit. For example, if you have had a residence permit as researchers, but you have started as a doctoral candidate during that time. That's one situation that we have seen. We have what we call here the 14 days rule, and that is that you can only apply for permanent residency not before 14 days are left on your present residence permit. So only 14 days before it runs out. But you have to apply before it runs out. So you have there's a window there of 2 weeks only. If you have visits abroad during the time you are here, that's also sometimes a problem. That can cause a problem when you later apply for permanent residency. As I said before, you need to show some kind of intention to stay in Sweden. And we've also seen that Migrationsverket sometimes claim that if you finish your PhD studies too early, which means earlier than 4 years, that can also cause a problem. Although the courts, if you appeal, usually will correct that. So these are some problems known from before that can still, of course, occur. So what then happens if your permanent residence permit is not granted? Then if you want to stay in Sweden, there are still chances to get a time-limited residence permit. And one example is, of course, if your studies or research are not finished, and then you can get a new temporary residence permit to complete them. you can get a residence permit for 1 year to seek for a job or to start your own company. Here we have learned that it's important, if you apply for permanent residency, to somehow inform Migrationsverket that if that application is turned down, that you instead want them to investigate if you can get this kind of residence permit instead. To get this kind of time-limited residence permit, you also need to have some kind of financing or income. But in this case, it's more types of incomes will count. For example, unemployment benefits, which I will come back to later. And also if you have money on your bank account or money during parental leave. So here there are more openings to fulfill this requirement compared to permanent residency. Then we come to alternative routes to get permanent residency. And one such possibility is to apply for what is called status as long-term resident, or in Swedish then varaktigt bosatt. And I will go through what this is and why this is a possibility in the future, as long as the rules are as they are now. So I will talk about what this is, if you can get permanent residency this way, and I will tell you the requirements. For example, that you need, in this case, to be in Sweden for 5 years with certain types of residence permit. And also here there is an income requirement, but it's different from when you apply for permanent residency. And also I will answer the question at which point you can apply for this status as long-term resident. So just the background, status as long-term resident is implemented in the Swedish legislation through a directive from the European Union. So all member states except Denmark and Ireland have this possibility. And if you get this status, one thing is that you have larger chances to work, study, or start your own business in most other member states within European Union, except then Denmark and Ireland, that are not included in this cooperation. And then the most important question perhaps is if it's possible to get permanent residency this way. And the answer is yes. Because in the legislation it said that if you are granted status as long-term resident, you will automatically get permanent residency in Sweden. As I said, you must live in Sweden for 5 years, and during that time you should not stay abroad for more than 10 months in total, and not more than 6 consecutive months. That is the qualification time, but you also need to have certain types of residence permit during those 5 years. So which types of residence permit will then count? And the good thing here is that all the types of residence permit that we have seen before that counts for permanent residency will count here as well. So residence permit for doctoral studies, for research, or for work will count. There are also a few others that will count. For example, if you have been here as a relative to some other person living in Sweden. But the point is, it must be a residence permit that allows you to stay permanently. And that means that other studies than doctoral studies will not count, because you cannot get permanent residency based on such a residence permit. So doctoral studies is a very important exception from the rule that studies normally do not count. And this is something we have got confirmation from Migrationsverket that this is how it is, and although we already knew it from before. yes, however, if you get this kind of residence permit to apply for a job after your studies or completing your research, that time will, according to Migrationsverket, not count to include in this the qualification time. Another reason this can be an important alternative is that in this case, other types of income will count to qualify for the requirement to have such an income. So of course, salary will count from unemployment will count here as well, but here you can also count unemployment benefits, benefits during parental leave, even if you do not have an employment. Scholarships and stipends could be one thing that counts, and even support from other family members, that is, if other family members have an income. Then the problem here, and what makes this a bit uncertain, is that Migrationsverket tell us that there is no fixed time limit here. No, it's not like when we talk about permanent residence and this 18 months. In this case, it's an individual assessment and an estimation if they think that you are able to support yourself economically in the future. And what they have said, that the income cannot be not two contracts, but what that exactly means, what is a short-term contract in this context is a bit unclear. So here, of course, the future will tell if you apply what happens and what is needed. The possibility to get this status as long-term resident has of course existed before, but it has not been used very much for our members, since it has been quite easy to get permanent residency. But this could be an alternative if you have been here for 5 years and you do not have an employment that is long enough to get permanent residency the other way. And then when you can apply, yes, you can apply in this case about 2 months before the resident permit runs out, so you can do it a bit earlier. But again, as always, you should apply before the present resident permit runs out. And if you do not already have permanent residency, an application for status as long-term resident will be registered also as an application for permanent residency, so you don't have to apply for that separately. So that was about long-term resident, and as I said, that can be an alternative to that you can look into, as long as the rules stay as they are. Then the question if you can appeal a decision from Migrationsverket, and in that case you appeal to the migration court. And you can appeal a decision from Migrationsverket, for example, if you are not granted any residence permit at all. But you can now also appeal if you are granted a temporary residence permit, but not a permanent residence permit, in the situation where they think that you do not fulfill the requirements for future income or good conduct. So this is new, actually. No, before it was not possible to appeal if you got a temporary residence permit. And this way you can appeal and see if the court will look differently on this demand for an income of 18 months. Because I should say that, as I said before, the requirement to have an income or an employment for 18 months at the time of the decision, that's an interpretation from Migrationsverket. And of course, if the courts later say that that is too much or too little, then that is what will be. That's how it will be in the future. It's always the court in the end that decides. And you can also appeal a decision if you're not granted status as long-term resident in Sweden or Swedish citizenship. What happens then if you appeal? Yeah, in most situations, you are allowed to stay in Sweden and also to work during the time you're waiting for a final decision, even if you're not granted a temporary residence permit. In the decision from Migrationsverket, it should be stated if you're allowed to stay and work during this time. But it's important that if you're in such a situation where you are without a residence permit but still allowed to stay, that you should not leave Sweden, because then you might not be able to get back again until you have got a new residence permit, if that is granted. So now what are we doing to change this? So we, as I said, these rules were implemented just before the summer, but of course there was a process before that, and we already during that raised our voice and said that this would have severe consequences for those that work within academia. So it was known before. The parliament accepted these changes, but they still went on and took that decision. And after the changes was implemented, we have also continued. We have written debate articles. We have articles in our own magazine, Universitetsläraren, and we have started contacts and discussions with politicians in order to get this changed. We can say that just before Christmas, the government sent a bill to the parliament stating that they wanted more doctoral candidates to be able to stay in Sweden. And then they implemented these rules that will have the opposite effect. So that's one thing that we will remind them about. We have also a lot of guidance at our web page. We have frequently asked questions there that will give you a lot of more information about the rules, and we will keep them updated, of course, if anything changes there. And we are also together with other organizations, other unions, one other union and the student union, National Student Union. We have started a petition, and you can sign up to that. And and the idea is to hand this over to the politicians later. And you see the link here, and we will put some links in the chat also, that you can so that you can come to these pages. And we're also preparing a pre-written letter that you can find at our webpage, and you can send to politicians in order to ask for a change of the new legislation. So, and then before I come to the section about unemployment insurance, just a few recommendations. You can, we urge you to read all the information at our webpage carefully, and of course the information you can find at Migrationsverket. If you want to find out more about your own situation, it's always good to contact Migrationsverket and discuss with them. If you have read our information and other information before, you will also be able to find out, I mean, to easier understand what they say, and perhaps also understand if they say something strange. And another recommendation, if you intend to stay in Sweden in the future, it can be a good idea to learn Swedish. One reason is that it will probably be a new requirement for permanent residency in the future. We don't know when, but most likely it will come. It is already a requirement for citizenship starting from 2025. And if you learn Swedish, you also have increased chances to get an employment, especially outside academia, and that will help you to fulfill this income requirement. So now come to a section about the unemployment insurance. As I said, the reason why we bring this up now is that we get quite a lot of questions about this and if it's possible still to get this kind of benefit. And actually it is in many cases. So for example, if you have applied for a residence permit and you are waiting for a decision, in most cases you are allowed to work during that time, which means that you can also get unemployment benefits. Also, if you have got this type of residence permit that allows you to seek a job for a year or start your own company, during that time you are also allowed to work, which also means that you can get this benefit. And also, if you have got a negative decision and appeal during the time you wait for the final decision from the court, you can also, in most cases, stay in Sweden and work, which also means that this benefit you will be able to get this benefit. But of course, it's important to know that the unemployment insurance in Sweden is an optional insurance, which means that you must apply for a membership in an unemployment insurance fund. And we recommend the unemployment insurance fund for academics, and you can see the link here. And for that, you pay a specific fee, which is today 140 crowns per month. It will be lowered to 130 from October this year. And in order to become a member in this organization, it's enough if you have had an employment in Sweden. And in total, you can get compensation during unemployment for 300 working days, so a bit more than 1 year if you are full-time unemployed, or 450 days if you have children under 18. Another thing you need to get unemployment benefit is that you need to have a work permit, or if you are in such a situation where you do not need a work permit. That is, for example, usually when you have applied for a new residence permit or permanent residence permit and you are waiting for a decision. That's one such example. And then you have to fulfill the other requirements, for example, that you have been a member in the unemployment insurance fund for at least a year and that you have had an employment for at least 6 months during that year. And I put here in red that perhaps it's even more important than before to be member. It has always been very important, but since this is an income that can help you to meet certain requirements for an income, for example, if you apply for time-limited residence permit to look for a job, or if you apply for status as long-term resident, or if you have to show that you can support family members so they can stay in Sweden. In addition to that, we have in SULF an income insurance. If you're a member in SULF, this income insurance is included in the membership automatically and in the membership fee. However, you need to be a member with us and also in the unemployment insurance fund. You need both these memberships for at least 1 year before you get unemployed. Our income insurance gives you in total about 80% of your previous income. And I will show you in the next slide why that is important here. Our income insurance that is included in the membership, it covers 150 working days, so about 7 months. And you have also a possibility there to buy an additional insurance to cover another 150 days, which then, and then you have to pay a fee for that, an extra fee, which starts from 41 crowns per month. And here you can see the value of our income insurance. For example, if you have a salary of 40,000 crowns per month at the time you get unemployed, then the maximum level that you can get from the unemployment fund is represented here in the blue color. So you can never get more than this, no matter what you earn. But through our income insurance, you can get extra compensation so that it covers about 80% of the full salary you have had. And it goes all the way up to 80,000 crowns per month. And if you have bought the additional insurance, the compensation will also go on after 150 days. And I should say that the additional insurance should also be assigned at least 1 year before the first day you get unemployed. And these are the figures after tax, so and based on an estimation of a tax level, so it can be a bit different, depends where in the country you live. So if you want to read more about the unemployment insurance, we have these links, and we have at our webpage, we have information what to do if you get unemployed, and also about our income insurance. If you want to know more about the rules for unemployment insurance in general, you should turn to Akademikernas A-kassa and get information from them. They are very helpful. And of course, there you also can sign for membership in their organization. The membership fees for SULF is this year 260 crowns per month. That's the normal fee, but doctoral candidates with an employment, you pay 125 crowns per month. We also welcome those of you that do not have an employment, that is if you have a scholarship, for example, and then you pay a fee of only 80 crowns per month. We also offer possibilities to have double membership with other unions within academic unions. And remember that the membership in the unemployment fund is separate, so you need both memberships to get access, for example, to the income insurance and get access to our support. And you are very much welcome to become a member in SULF, and you can find all the information and application form at this through this link. And as a new member, you also get some insurances, other insurances for free during 3 months, and that are insurances for if you have an accident, a life insurance, and insurance for sickness and certain diagnosis. That's actually 2 different insurances. Medical care insurance is also included for new members for 3 months. And you can read more about our insurances at this webpage. These insurances are provided by the company Folksam. So that was all I had to present today. And I thank you all for listening. And I can see there are some questions in Q&A and still. So I ask my colleagues if you have been able to answer a few of them.
Yes, we've tried to answer some of them, but there are lots. There are like hundreds of questions. Just to inform you who are listening, you cannot see that other people's questions until we answer them. So I'll just try to ask you some of them and just be a few. We have some time, and try to find some with sort of general interest. Here is one. Will my current PR application applied in May 2021 can be considered for long-term residence?
I don't know if you have applied only for permanent residency. I think you need to change the application to, or at least contact Migrationsverket and ask if they can consider both. Or perhaps you have to file a separate application for that. But I think you have to ask them how they will handle that.
Here's another question. I'm a PhD student. For the Corona time, I was outside of Sweden, but I was working remotely and paying taxes for my salary. Will it be included in the 4 years that are required to get the PR?
And that's a good question, and it might or might not, depending on the situation and depending on what Migrationsverket says in that particular situation. We have seen examples that if you are employed by a Swedish university and as a part of your research or your doctoral studies, you are working abroad, that can count as if you lived in Sweden during that time. In other cases where you go abroad, it can be more problematic, but it's a bit from case to case, but there are possibilities, absolutely.
Good. Here's another question. How universities can help students in terms of raising voices at right forums? Should SULF write letter to university to act on it? It's a more like a comment than a question, maybe.
Yeah, I can say we have had contacts with universities and their organization, and we believe that and hope, and most of all, we hope that they will also take some action. At least they have before been worried about this, so I guess they still are worried because they need you also for the future to have researchers and teachers at the university.
Good, thank you. Here's an appeal from one of the attendees regarding the petition. I shared the link before and you mentioned it. Just please tell the people that they need to look at their email addresses right after filling out the petition form in order to complete signing. So you have to confirm that you actually want to sign. And but I can see, I kept an eye on the petition during the seminar, and the numbers are rising rapidly. So sounds good. And if you like, please share the petition so that everybody else, people you know, can sign as well. And we're also going to share the links later on. You're going to get an email, for example, after this seminar, later today probably, with the link to the petition and also link to where you can look at the recording of this seminar and also another thing. So we'll get back with you.
Yeah.
Check the email.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, and of course, I mean, not only you that are directly affected can sign. All your colleagues that are worried about this can also sign the petition. I see actually one question here that could be of interest, and that is what happens if you have a partner that is a citizen within the European Union. And now I chose not to include that here because it would take perhaps too much time then. But if you are relative to EU citizen, you usually have something instead of uppehållstillstånd, you have something called uppehållsrätt, right of residence, and then you are in a different situation. You might not even be affected by this because you can after 5 years actually get what is called permanent right of residence. So you are in a way basically treated as a EU citizen. So these new rules mainly affects those of you that are from outside European Union and a few other countries like Norway and Iceland and so on that go under the same regulation.
Here's another question. To fulfill the income requirement that you mentioned before, can my business be, for example, real estate or capital based, something else than search?
Yes, I mean, it does both. I mean, for the requirement to have a employment or own company, that is, well, the requirement is to have that, not what kind of employment it is. So it can be any type of employment, as long as it is, what you say, lasts long enough and reach a certain income level.
Here's another interesting question. Is there any limit to the amount of time Migrationsverket can take to make a decision, like a reasonable processing time, or else they can just wait and say no?
All government authorities are supposed to handle applications and other things as quickly as possible. So, but of course, we can imagine that it will take longer for now, because first these new rules are new also to them. So, and the other thing is that they need to spend more time with each application now than before, when they only, so to say, had to check that you had a residence permit, the right type of residence permit for 4 years. Now they have to look at your income and other things. So probably the handling times will increase unless they put more resources in there.
Okay, here's another question. Could you please clarify more about how long-term residency automatically qualifies for PR? Is it 18-month requirements still in place for the automatic shift?
No, that's the point with that. That is that first of all, it's said in the legislation that if you get this status, you also automatically get permanent residency, and that's also an exception from this the requirement for income. I mean, the same type of income as permanent residency, but there are still this income requirement under long-term resident, but it looks different, and it might be easier to fulfill, especially since other types of income will count than from an employment. But we actually don't know if what they mean with that it should be long-term enough. It's quite unclear. Yeah.
Here's a question about income insurance, the SULF income insurance that's included in the membership fee. If I have to move out to Sweden after PhD, can I receive the income insurance from SULF?
In order to get compensation during unemployment and also from our income insurance, you must have compensation from the unemployment insurance fund in Sweden, which usually means that you must be in Sweden at that time. Then there are some possibilities to apply for the right to go to other countries within European Union and apply for a job there during 3 months and keep the compensation. But that's a special exception. Apart from that, you cannot get compensation while you are abroad. But you might get it if you get back to Sweden after work abroad, for example.
Mm-hmm. As I said, we have lots of questions. They're like more than several hundreds of questions, just to let you know. So we just have to pick a few. Let's see. About the language requirement that was raised before. Swedish is a requirement for citizenship for people with application date starting 2025, or also for people who applied before 2020 and have not received their decision before. Can you clarify?
I don't know, actually.
We don't know anything about the language requirement yet.
Yeah, for citizenship, it will come from 2025, but if it will be also for applications before that, I'm not sure. But I think you can find information about that for Migrationsverket. So, yeah, I see here a question how to show an intention to stay in Sweden, and that is not when it comes to permanent residency, it's not a very hard requirement. It's more, I would say, you can turn it around and say as long as you do not have an intention to live somewhere else, that should be enough. It's a bit different when you apply for citizenship, because then you also have to show that you had an intention for 5 years in the past to stay in Sweden.
Here's another question on that topic. What does intention to stay in Sweden exactly mean? What is it? Is it enough to say, I want to stay in Sweden, or you have to, how do you prove?
Yeah, basically it can be enough that you have no sort of taken no actions or show no interest to go somewhere else. So that's basically it. Usually there are not so that many questions asked about that from Migrationsverket.
Here's a comment from one of you attendees. Just to let you all know, I'm just answering this live so you can see it. The head of doctoral education in our department in Umeå University shared the petition among department and contacted WASP as well. So there is things going on at different levels, just to clarify.
Yeah. So yeah, and I see also a question here if you have a stipend, if that counts as in this case as a guest researcher. And I should say that what is important is which type of residence permit you have for during the qualification time, not how you're financed. So if you have a stipend as a researcher, you are most likely you have a residence permit for research, and that will be fine. But you still need to show an income for the future when you apply for permanent residence, and that income must be from an employment in that case.
So Robert, here's a question. What is the potential support of SULF if one appeals to the decision?
Yes, since these issues regarding migration and a few other things are not directly linked to labor law, we take from case to case, take a decision what kind of support we can give, and it must be issues of general importance. So that's basically what we can say. So as a member, you can turn to us and get more information about that, but it's only in specific cases, and that's just because we do not have resources enough to handle all cases in the court like that.
Good, thank you. What do you say, Robert? Do you want some more questions? There are lots.
Yes, if we can find some general themes.
Long-term residence is different from citizenship. How? Can you explain?
Yes, it is. It's long-term resident is well, as I said, it's one thing is that you can go to most other EU countries and work there easier. So that's one point. The other one is that you get in Sweden then permanent residency, and that's why perhaps that's the main reason why we brought it up here today. While citizenship gives you, for example, the right to vote in all the types of elections, you can keep it forever, so to say, while the other ones, you can lose them, both permanent residency and status as long-term resident, you can lose if you stay outside Sweden for too long. And as a citizen, you can also get all types of employment that also those that require citizenship, for example, within the police, the military, and certain companies that deal with military issues.
Here's a question. Have you asked Migrationsverket what was the motivation between the 18-month contract requirement that they defined, given that regularly contracts in academia are given in a yearly basis?
what they write is that this is an interpretation, again, of this term, viss varaktighet. And there is, of course, not yet any guidance from the court, which will be, of course, in the end, what decides. There are some guidance around this term from before, but that is for application for temporary residence permit, and in a situation where it's about a family reunification, a family member that wanted to move to Sweden, and then the highest migration court said that 12 months was enough. But in this case, Migrationsverket claimed that you need more because this is a permanent residence permit, and also it's not family reunification, where there are certain rules also from the European Union that member states must apply to.
All right, thank you. I think it's time to wrap up this Q&A. We still have lots of unanswered questions, but hopefully you find answers to some of them on the SULF website. Robert, any final advice to people? What kind of advice would you give?
Well, first of all, to sign up this petition and make your voice heard. And as I said, we will soon publish this letter that you can use to send to politicians in the parliament, for example, and also ask your colleagues to support you. And then try to find out, if you want to stay in Sweden, if there are alternative ways to manage. And long-term resident could be one, at least to get a temporary residence permit can be another. And then if somehow we must get this 18-month requirement tested, that will of course happen. This is a general rule, as I said before, for all applicants. So sooner or later, such cases will come to the court and we will know. But hopefully we can get the legislation changed before that. But that's of course something we cannot know. It's, as I say, we need a new decision in the parliament, so we need to convince the members of the parliament, at least the majority, to do something here.
All right, so we just keep fighting.
Yes, we have something to fight for. That's clear. And
all right, so I think we just say thank you for everybody who was attending this seminar, and I will send you an email probably later today with links to these, to the petition and the appeal, and also to the recording if you would like to share.
Yes.
So thank you everybody for attending, and have a nice weekend.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Okay. Yep. Bye.